People rise up against chaos. Welcome to Law and Society. Please subscribe. And let's start talking about, we'll start with Mr. Abrego Garcia, and then I'll end with another story about another person who was illegally removed. Can't say deported, because with deportation comes the presumption that there's due process of law given. They were illegally removed. So there's no development in the Garcia case except for that Judge Sinis has ordered an expedited discovery process for the case in front of her. And I believe that she has set I think it's a week-long process and given instructions as to what depositions are allowed. And it's part of getting the discovery is after you have served notice, after there's been a complaint and a reply, and there's been there's been briefing on both, and the court has come up with sort of a preliminary schedule. And that schedule involves the discovery process, because the discovery, you get the information that the other party has in the matter that you're bringing up. Here it being where Mr. Abrego Garcia is, what the government has done so far, and what the government is planning on doing to facilitate his return back to the United States per the Supreme Court's order. So we'll have to see what antics the government comes up with now. If it doesn't want to comply with discovery, it's going to talk about foreign powers and classified documents all over again. And if it stonewalls the court has now written more than once that the government has not complied with her orders. So it's very much up to the court to first start contempt proceedings, and second, ask for the Supreme Court to intervene. And that brings me to this statement called sua sponte, which means on its own. The Supreme Court has the power to visit an issue on its own if it feels like it, if it thinks the times call for it, if there's a public interest in it. And the public interest in Abrego Garcia is growing. So, and I'll tell you about that in a minute, but I want to remind you that Abrego Garcia is being deprived of due process of law and is being subjected to cruel and unusual punishment every single day that he is being held in El Salvador on the basis of violation of the Fifth Amendment, violation of the Eighth Amendment, and in comportment to a contract that Bukele and Trump made to send people there, no questions asked, for the amount of $6 million. So, with that, there was this hot mic moment, or I don't know if it was hot mic or if Donald Trump doesn't care anymore, where he's talking to Bukele about, now we're talking about the homegrown criminals. You know, like American citizens, talking about building 5 more detention camps in El Salvador. Well, first of all, not providing a U.S. citizen due process of law is unconstitutional, just as unconstitutional as is not affording it to Abrego Garcia or anybody else residing in the United States. But when you up the ante with U.S. citizens, because U.S. citizens have the maximum rights you can under the U.S. Constitution. So deporting the U.S. citizen, first of all, doesn't make any sense because their nation, their home is the United States. But doing so, even upon incarceration or even upon conviction and sentencing, is and subjecting the defendant to cruel and unusual punishment. It deprives him of his family rights. It deprives him of opportunity for parole. It deprives him of any of the appellate processes that are available to defendants, even when they lose a case. So when they lose a case in trial court, they have the option to appeal that case. And when that appeal process is exhausted, and it says that, there's even the death penalty were to be the case, there's an appeal process for moving the death penalty to life sentence without parole. So the due process covers the entire prosecutorial process, starting with you being arrested on the basis of probable cause, and then you being given due process instructions, your Miranda rights, and that's when your due process begins. So sending a U.S. citizen to a foreign country upon conviction or without due process of law, both of them defies the Constitution's Eighth Amendment of cruel and unusual punishment, number one. And in the case of without due process of law, it violates the Fifth Amendment as well. Now we go back to related to the Garcia update. Chuck Grassley, Senator Grassley from Iowa, had a town hall. And one of the biggest cheers was, bring that guy back from El Salvador. Supreme Court has told us. So the Iowa town hall that Chuck Grassley has gone to is up in arms about how this administration is defying Supreme Court order and not bringing the people back. So they're not accepting Senator Grassley's explanations. They're worried about the fact that due process was not given. They're not accepting this partisan nonsense. They are well-informed voters who are concerned about due process of law, about this man who is being held illegally despite the Supreme Court's order. And they are informed about Social Security, makes it a point to say, call Social Security what it is. It is not an entitlement. It is an earned benefit. And essentially schooling Chuck Grassley on what the reality of the matter is, while Chuck Grassley was very unsuccessfully trying to peddle MAGA GOP talking points. In another town hall, Marjorie Taylor Greene town hall, two protesters were stun-gunned. They weren't being violent. They were screaming, yes, but you have a freedom of speech. They were stun-gunned and obviously removed from the premises. Now, remember the Booker town hall? I remember watching a Booker town hall where there were two protesters as well. And Senator Booker's response was, yes, the law enforcement will take care of it, but I respect your right to speak out. That is why we are here. So the two sides are not the same in how they deal with dissent. If you look at just this instance in a Marjorie Taylor Greene town hall versus what Cory Booker did in his town hall. So there's talk about, moving on, talk about breaches in various departments, the latest one being in the Labor Department. And I'll read you a piece, part of a piece from NPR about that in a minute. But DOGE is trying to get into everything from IRS information to Social Security information and now into labor data. So, in a whistleblower complaint, NPR reports, a whistleblower's disclosure details how DOGE may have taken sensitive labor data. The DOGE employees, who were effectively led by White House advisor and billionaire tech CEO Elon Musk, appeared to have their sights on accessing the National Labor Relations Board's internal systems. Technical staff members were alarmed about what DOGE engineers did when they were granted access, particularly when those staffers noticed a spike in data leaving the agency. It's possible that the data included sensitive information on unions, ongoing legal cases, and corporate secrets. Data that 4 labor law experts tell NPR should almost never leave the NLRB, and that has nothing to do with making the government more efficient or cutting spending. So, that is the latest sort of intrusion that DOGE is making to our government and the safety of now our unions and our workers. So this is an assault on unions and working people around the United States. Politico reports that under pressure from DOGE, nearly all staff of the Defense Digital Service, the Pentagon's fast-track tech development arm, are resigning over the coming month. The resignations will effectively shut down the decade-old program after the end of April. So, developing arm of our defense digital infrastructure is going to close down. What could go wrong, right? Every single news that you read now, not every single, 1 in every 3 news stories has to do with Donald Trump wrecking our country, dismantling our government, using the government as a weapon against his personal enemies, usurping the court orders, defying court orders, and essentially neutering Congress because MAGA still has yet to lift a finger to do anything to stop Donald Trump. So now, Reuters reports Donald Trump said in an interview that he planned to roll out a new program offering money for immigrants in the country illegally to leave voluntarily. Here's another thought, Donald Trump. How about you leave these people alone and let them work in the industries where they work for the wages which they work for, so that the country may be able to feed itself and do the work that American citizens won't? Why don't you give them temporary work status because they're paying into Social Security anyway? Why don't you give them pathway to citizenship because they are productive members of our society over whom we have our country and government has jurisdiction? Why is that not a solution? Many news agencies, including CNN, posted that Hong Kong Post, a postal service in the semi-autonomous region of Hong Kong, has suspended postal service to the United States after Donald Trump's tariff hikes. This is another example of how American primacy around the world is in a recession and that our power is waning. And every time Donald Trump attacks the way the systems are set up, and there's more upheaval, there's more uncertainty, the dollar weakens even more. And with that, faith in the US dollar weakens. And with that, American financial influence weakens. Reuters has reported that US judge blocked President Donald Trump's administration from freezing billions of dollars in grants Congress authorized under climate investment and infrastructure laws of Democratic predecessor, former President Biden. So he's freezing these grants for investment in infrastructure. He is essentially stopping money appropriated by Congress all over again, this time to usurp what President Biden did and undermine the laws passed by Congress that give the president the power to grant these grants to the various states to develop the states, to move it forward, to build infrastructure, to be climate resilient. And while he's doing this, he's very much okay with, Kristi Noem doing away with FEMA, which takes care of disasters and which red states heavily rely upon. This is what's happening in our government today. And the news, Bloomberg reports that the White House announced Tuesday that it was eliminating the traditional press pool access for wire services after a federal court ordered the administration to end viewpoint discrimination against the Associated Press. So instead of letting in the Associated Press, they will now just undo the traditional press pool wire services. Reuters adds, wire services, including Reuters and Bloomberg News, will no longer hold a permanent slot in the small pool of reporters who cover Trump, the White House said, as it moves to exert greater control over who gets to ask him questions and report in real time. So this is a pushing away of the conventional free press. This is the pushing away of the way the press has worked for decades. And it's a pushing away of democracy at work. It's a violation of the freedom of press. And Donald Trump, instead of listening to the court, is doubling down on it by now making vulnerable Bloomberg News and Reuters and other traditional wire services that have had permanent slots in the press pool. President Biden came out and spoke to defend Social Security. He spoke coherently, made sense, had a sense of humor, and seemed in much better shape physically and mentally than Donald Trump. I just wanted to point that out. So the solutions that we have for Social Security, as I've said before, is one, you tax the rich, and two, you raise the cap on what people pay Social Security tax on. And you know what? Chuck Grassley was faced with that exact solution as well in the town hall. That raised that limit. Why do I have to pay Social Security tax for every dime I make when I haven't made that much money as these people make? If you cut off Social Security tax at $250,000, like that does not seem like the right way to approach Social Security solvency. So do the job, cut the loopholes, make billionaires pay their fair share, fund the Social Security by lifting the cap on the $250,000 tax rebate the tax that you pay on Social Security, so that you pay tax on every dollar you make. You pay a Social Security tax on every dollar you make. That's what normal people do. That's what billionaires should also get to do. The last story I bring to you just came to me from a post, and I'll post the post in the description box, by Stephanie Kennedy. It's the story of Murwil Gutierrez, who was also illegally removed from the United States. When ICE agents descended upon 19-year-old Murwil Gutierrez in New York City, they realized he was not the intended target for their operation. But they arrested the boy anyway. Murwil was in fact in the United States legally from Venezuela seeking asylum. Murwil's father, Wilmer Gutierrez, witnessed ICE officers grab his son and two other boys just outside the family home. One officer said, "No, he's not the one." Another officer replied, "Take him anyway." Think about the callousness of that. Think about how dangerous that is. Think about the possibility that maybe out of those people there are US citizens already in this gulag in El Salvador. The Gutierrez family and their attorneys contend Murwil has no criminal record, no gang affiliations, and not even a tattoo. As has been reported, authorities have been using tattoos to profile alleged gang members. So this guy was just picked up, and they said, "This is not the right guy," and the other officers said, "Take him anyway." Like, what? And then you were not given due process of law? And now you're in El Salvador in a terrorism prison? It is the stuff of nightmares. It's a horror story. And this is a real American horror story that we are living through. We're not living through it. People like Murwil and Andre and Abrego Garcia and more stories coming out, they are the ones paying for it. And when due process is not afforded to these people, due process right for all of us is undermined, weakened, and goes away. And we pave the pathway to tyranny, to authoritarianism, to a police surveillance state that is exactly what our framers did not intend to do. We build up an autocracy and a monarchy. And our country simply will not survive that. So with that said, there's a lot of information in today's news. Some of it sounds, I'm repeating myself, and I am, but I wholeheartedly believe that everybody needs to be updated on what is happening with these things that I've talked to you about. I'll provide the links to the Chuck Grassley Town Hall and to Stephanie Kennedy's Blue Sky Post and the article talking about Mr. Gutierrez, who has now been illegally removed from the United States and is in the CICAT prison in El Salvador. So take a look at those stories and listen to that town hall. Watch that town hall. That was informative for many, many reasons. With that said, please like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon.